Good morning, happy Christmas Eve morning, and welcome to the Christmas Eve edition of the OBX Wave Report, where we are going to, in a Christmassy fashion, discuss all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. And for this morning, for the OBX Wave Report, we're going to talk about the local conditions as well as the overall conditions for the local conditions for the Outer Banks, as well as the overall conditions for the US East Coast and the North American continent and the North Atlantic, all of which affect the Outer Banks. But starting off, I just wanted to focus in on this stunning, amazing satellite shot provided by NOAA. And what we have here right now is a bomb cyclone. I'm going to zoom in on the, ooh, hey, this is great. The bomb cyclone over Canada right now, this big swirl. And down here is the Great Lakes, which is covered in cloud still. And then portions of the US Northeast, which are still covered in cloud or blanketed in snow. This satellite shot is picking up the snow cover on the ground. And then you can see the clearing beginning to settle in for portions of the US East Coast in the Northeast and in the Outer Banks as these strong cold winds whip in from the west and the northwest and run over the much warmer than normal Atlantic Ocean. And you can see the effect of these cold winds hitting the warmer than normal North Atlantic in the form of these clouds, basically steam that is being produced as this cold air hits this warm air, and the North Atlantic basically steaming and producing these streams of clouds. So a very beautiful satellite shot, very dramatic as these strong winds just come in and knock into that really warm ocean water. In comparison, of course, like the air temperatures here are ranging from in the teens to even in the single digits. And in the Outer Banks right now in the 20s, so super cold. And then the ocean water temperatures are between 20 to 30 degrees warmer or more, maybe 20 to 30 or 40 degrees warmer. So that contrast is causing the ocean surface um, to steam by comparison, and we get that evaporation from that cold air, and then you get that cloud formation in these streamers, which is just really cool if you ask me. um, Looking at the infrared satellite, we can now just barely see the edge of this bomb cyclone that is up here in Canada, and we've got another impulse moving in through the Pacific Northwest as well for the United States as this very large frontal boundary drapes down from Mexico through the Gulf of Mexico out into the North Atlantic and then coming back in over extreme eastern Canada and Baffin Bay. For wave conditions across the US East Coast right now, we do have strong winds coming in through Maine and just east of Newfoundland. So the significant wave heights just offshore of Maine are in the 21 to 22 foot range. And then up here, just west of Newfoundland, we've got almost 25-foot significant wave height. So very high surf up here to the north and east, to the east of this bomb cyclone that is forming. For the Outer Banks, or yeah, the bomb cyclone that I say is forming. It has formed actually. It's forecast to weaken a bit. So it's about as strong as it's going to be right now, and it's centered up here in southeastern Canada. So for the Outer Banks, the offshore wave heights or the near offshore wave heights are in the range of about 7 feet just off of Jeanette, 5 to 7 feet just off of Jeanette's Pier, and then just off of Cape Hatteras around 6 feet, and then off of Ocracoke around 5.5 feet. These swells are getting blown out to sea because the winds are coming in strong out of the west here. So most of the nearshore waves are going to be even smaller than this and mostly blown out. Focusing in on local conditions for the Outer Banks for this Christmas Eve. I'm going to start here to the north, just east of Manio with Jeanette's Pier, where wave heights are right now in the range of 2 feet. So these are 2 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet. So these are onshore waves at 2 feet at Jeanette's Pier. So waves have come down considerably as those strong winds are blowing the tops off the waves and pushing the swell offshore. The primary period is 17 seconds with a secondary period at 9 seconds. Winds are coming in strong out of the west with a little bit of a northwest component at Jeanette Spear at 28 miles per hour. So very strong offshore wind conditions. Air temperatures of frigid 24 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperature much warmer in the range of 52 degrees Fahrenheit. And then for weather conditions, it's partly cloudy with those clouds forming just offshore as those cold winds run into those warmer ocean waters. It's very windy, and the expected high temperature today at Jeanette's Pier is just 29 degrees Fahrenheit, so very cold there at Jeanette's Pier today on Christmas Eve. Crazy cold conditions there for the Outer Banks. It's typically not that cold this time of year. I guess I think the average temperatures, air temperatures in the range of the low 50s. So much colder than normal today as that front passes and we get that cold air getting pulled down by that bomb cyclone across the US East Coast. Moving on south to Road Anthony, as the locals call it, or many of the locals call it. We're just going to head on south. Here we go to Road Anthony Pier. And at Road Anthony, wave heights are a little bit bigger than Jeanette's Pier. Not much taller, but in the 2 to 3 foot range, so a little bit larger. Again, mostly blown out conditions. The primary period is 16 seconds with a secondary period at 5 seconds for the waves. Winds are also out of the west to northwest, west with a slight northwest component at 28 miles per hour, and that is a strong offshore flow, which is pushing those swells off, blowing those wave tops off, and whatever waves do come in, they're going to be pretty hollow because of that strong west wind. Air temperatures are 27 degrees Fahrenheit, and ocean water temperatures are warming up a little bit at 56, but still very cold conditions. If you do go out and brave it, make sure you've got all your full cold weather protection. With those air temperatures, you're going to need it. The weather conditions at Rodanth are sunny and windy with an expected high today of 30 degrees, so not getting above freezing at Rodanth. And then here we are going to head on south past Avon to Cape Hatteras to get our third location for our wave report today, where waves are also 2 to 3 feet at Cape Hatteras. So 2 to 3 foot waves, and just overall 2 to 3 foot waves for the east and southeast facing beaches here. The wave period at Cape Hatteras for the primary swell is 16 seconds, and for the secondary swell is 12 seconds. Winds are out of the west with a slight northwest component at 29 miles per hour, which is also offshore, very strong offshore winds. Air temperature is also 27 degrees Fahrenheit here at Cape Hatteras. The ocean's much warmer. If you get into the ocean with this variance in air to ocean temperature, sure, the ocean's going to feel warm, but do not be deceived because even a 64 degree Fahrenheit ocean temperature is pretty cold. So you're going to need your cold weather protection, especially for those air temperatures, but also for the ocean water temperatures. Weather is partly cloudy with those clouds being produced by the interaction of the cold air and the warm ocean, some of them streaming across Cape Hatteras, blown by those very strong winds. It's very windy right now, and then the expected high for Cape Hatteras today is 31 degrees Fahrenheit. So none of the locations that I've picked for today have air temperatures above the freezing mark for the Outer Banks. So very, very cold air temperatures today for the Outer Banks as blustery winds sweep in out of the west and northwest, kicked up by that bomb cyclone way up to the north and west over northeastern Canada. So looking at the weather models, I did want to show you our bomb cyclone, and actually this weather model did just update just a moment ago, or I guess about a half hour ago when I was looking at this model and preparing for this morning's wave report. The cyclone's minimum central pressure was 962 millibars, and looking at the model provided for us by Tropical Tidbits here, we see that the central pressure of the cyclone has edged up a bit to 964 millibars. Still a very, very powerful low pressure system. And I'm sure up there in Canada right now, they're experiencing very snowy, windy conditions around this bomb cyclone system. In the Great Lakes region as well, heavy, moderate, light, moderate, and heavy snows coming in due to the influence of both the bomb cyclone and the lake effect snows. So regions right now that are vulnerable to heavy snows due to lake effect conditions are really getting it right now. And then parts of the extreme northern edge of the Northeast are also getting those snowy conditions from the bomb cyclone and the lake effect. But for the most part, the severe weather has moved off, with the exception of some rough conditions along the shores here in coastal Maine. And then this system here is expected to meander and weaken up in the eastern section of Canada for a little while. But for the most part, the fury of this storm system, or the worst portions of the fury of this storm system, have been spent. So um, we are at the tail end of this event, even though conditions are likely to continue for some time for eastern Canada, according to these models. Looking at the jet stream, I just did want to show you how the energy is translating from the surface into the higher portions of the atmosphere. And we see what is in effect nearly a cutoff upper level low. I'm going to go ahead and advance the models a little bit. And again, this upper level low looks like it just really gets cut off, which is an indicator for a more stationary system. So that the system is expected to bounce around up here in eastern Canada for at least a little while before the energy appears to translate up here into the Baffin Bay region. But it's worth noting that this dip in the jet stream over Canada and the US Northeast does remain, and this does indicate a tendency for storm formation for this region, kind of an ongoing longer term pattern, one that actually is something that we would tend to expect due to the La Nina conditions in the Pacific. It tends to help to produce this tendency here for northeastern storm systems. And then also just like to note that there's a dip in the jet stream that has tended to form for the northeastern portion of the Atlantic here near Europe, which is kind of bounced around. So there's also a tendency for storm formation up here in the North Atlantic and in the near Europe region. And this has been the case since probably mid-fall at least. And looking at the longer term weather models, this does appear to be a tendency as well in the longer term weather models as we look forward. I did just want to give you a snapshot of the winds swirling around this bomb cyclone right now. This is in the Earth Null School wind model, and we're getting some very strong winds up here in eastern Canada in the range of 50 miles per hour. So blizzard type conditions up there in Canada with blowing snow and very strong winds. And then just off the US East Coast, most of the winds have shifted around to the west with near gale force just offshore, or gale force in some locations. And right now, the strongest onshore flow is up here near Newfoundland, where they're getting most of the coastal impacts right now associated with the system. And these strong winds generated both by the bomb cyclone here with very low pressure and a pretty strong ridge up to the east. So the difference in pressure between the low and the high is driving these strong winds onshore over here in Newfoundland and kicking up those wave conditions to significant wave heights in the range of 25 feet. So that's pretty rough, and you could see some waves in those zones punching up to 40 feet, maybe 50 feet in some locations for the largest waves. So that's a general view of the bomb cyclone as it reaches its peak and starts to wind down, and as we start to settle down into much colder temperatures here across the US East. and in the Outer Banks as well. So I am going to right now look at some long-term weather models to give you guys an understanding of what we can expect both for the Outer Banks, the North Atlantic, and for the U.S. East. And as I mentioned before, there's a tendency now, it seems, in the weather models for storm formation over the U.S. Northeast region, with the Mid-Atlantic here for the Outer Banks kind of getting the tail end of these systems. But with the tendency for storm formation focusing more to the north, the coastal impacts for the Outer Banks would tend to be reduced. So we would have less onshore winds and more offshore winds with these lows forming to the north of us. And it's also worth noting that there's a tendency up here in the North Atlantic for storms to form as well. And I'm going to go ahead and run the weather models to just show you guys what's expected to happen. So this cyclone up here just meanders around, bounces around, and then just slowly peters out. We get a storm forming off the east coast that gets sucked up into the central Atlantic. We get just a procession of systems that strengthen in this trough region here, south and east of Greenland, and in this trough region here over the U.S. Northeast. Of course, these are longer term models, so you can kind of take some of them with a grain of salt a bit, but it does give you an understanding of the tendency of storm formation for these regions. So here again, we have another storm forming across the U.S. Northeast, then tracking off the East Coast, and then another storm forming here just south and east of Greenland. And it is worth noting that some of these storms get quite strong in the low 970s, upper 960 millibar range. And again, another impulse coming in here through the northeast and then moving on off to the North Atlantic. I did want to show you one storm system that is predicted in the models. This one focusing in on Europe. Here we go, I believe. So very rather strong storm system projected to run into Europe over Thursday and Friday of next week, potentially bombing out. I believe that, yep, in the nine, it's just at the edge here, but it's in the 950 millibar range as it hits the North Sea. And that's a very strong storm for the North Sea predicted by Thursday of next week. So something our friends over across the pond in Europe may want to take a look at or may want to keep a weather eye on, as they say, as we look toward the future. Now, looking at wave conditions more locally for the Outer Banks, I do actually want to focus in on the wave models and show you guys what's expected in the near offshore environment here. So let's just go to now. So we got 7-foot waves, most of them pushing off toward the east, so away from the beaches, just off the Outer Banks. And I'm just going to go ahead and advance this model. By tomorrow, waves are still being blown offshore and the wave heights have fallen down quite a bit. We do have some southerly swells in the range of about 3 feet coming in toward the beaches, southern beaches tomorrow, but nothing really to write home about. And then into the 26th, we have waves continuing to drop off, but we have the swell turning back toward the shore. So it does look like wave conditions might improve slightly into Monday, but not by much. You're looking at 2 to 3 foot waves for the east facing beaches coming in from the ocean. And then the offshore environment also pretty placid coming in through Tuesday and then Wednesday, also pretty placid. And then into Thursday, Thursday the model won't go. So over the next 5 days, the waves are expected to be pretty placid for the Outer Banks, smaller wave conditions, not really much to write home about as the stormy influences move off to other regions. So unfortunately for us surfers, we're not going to really expect much in the way of good surf over the holiday weekend for the Outer Banks. We're going to take a break here for a little while, and I don't know. We're likely going to have to be looking more than a week out before surf conditions start to improve. So that's my Christmas Eve wave report for you guys. Thank you for joining me, and I hope everyone is happy and safe and warm. at their prospective holiday locations for this Christmas break. I wish you good cheer and good times with friends and family. Please be safe in those cold conditions, those of you who are experiencing cold, and please be safe also if for those of you who are heading down to the beaches, wherever you may be. And also, please remember to do everything you can to help save our wonderful, beautiful, majestic coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. So, thank you once again, and I'll be back with you at some point. I am also at the remote locations with my friends and family, so the frequency of my wave reports over the next few days won't be um, quite as on point as we have been lately. Although I'm gonna try to get you guys at least one supplemental video each day. I've got some ideas. There's some things going on around here with the Sierra Club, some cool um, climate action, environmental action, naturey kind of things that I'd like to focus on, even though I'm not presently on the coastline for you guys. So thank you again, and Merry Christmas Eve.